Hi, there is a polarization in opinions that used to be taboos many years ago in Africa. One of them is the open debate about homosexuality. Today, we can talk about it without breaking any traditional norms. But what is it and why is it having different names and categories? How are discussions about LGBTQ shaping the global community, especially Africa? That will be our discussion today. My name is Tega King, and as usual, my co-host is Paul Hockney, and this is Africans React. Before we move forward, let us watch a video which gives us a clue of what Virginia Palmer said and how some members of parliament and human rights activists reacted during that period.
Tonight, Sam George is the MP for Ningo Pram Pram. He was recently at the United Nations talking exactly about this. He is one of the proponents of this particular bill in Parliament. Michael Augustus Agagbo is a senior programs officer at the Human Rights and Social Inclusion CDD Ghana. Joins me in the studio. Rabbi Odami Ansah is head servant, Grace House Chapel International, and CEO of Marriage Clinic, and also joins us via Zoom tonight. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time here on PMS. Sam, let me start with you. Having listened now, it's been a few days since Virginia Palmer spoke. Considering the economic consequences she lays out for us, should we pause for thought?
To your listeners, our viewers, and then the rest of the panelists. I believe that the facts and statistics that you shared at the beginning of the program tell half of the story. You need to look at the portfolio of Ghana's exports to the United States. What makes up that $1.7, $1.8 billion, and find out who is that benefiting before you and that helps you put into context what Virginia Palmer is saying and the threat she's offering, whether we will place any value on that threat or not. Now, I'm looking at the U.S. Department of Commerce website, the International Trade Administration's own report on Ghana-U.S. trade. And it says that the major trade items between Ghana and the U.S. was basically cocoa, crude, and for me, if you look at those, and gold, cocoa, crude, and gold, those are the major exports from Ghana to the US. Now, if you look at the companies in that space that are exporting cocoa powder, cocoa paste, or looking at exporting crude oil to the United States, those are not Ghanaian companies, those are American companies. So yes, it is reflecting as Ghanaian trade to the US, but it is not Ghanaian companies and it's not Ghanaians who are making that, who are earning that money. It's American companies working in Ghana and exporting Ghanaian products to America that make up that chunk of trade. So you see, it's important that we disaggregate the figures that are being churned out. So yes, there appears to be a trade surplus, but is that trade surplus to the benefit of Ghanaian businesses and Ghanaian citizens? No, it's American businesses trading in Ghana, trading in gold, trading in crude, and trading in cocoa.
But these businesses will pay taxes to us. They will employ Ghanaians also. They are, set up here. Great benefits to the economy.
And Evans, do you believe that because Ghana is going to pass a law that majority of Ghanaians support, an oil business, for example, Cosmos, that we know has American part ownership, which is working in Ghana and exporting crude, Cosmos will close up shop in Ghana and leave Ghana, when Cosmos is also operating in other Gulf countries where they have even more draconian rules? Do you think that because the American ambassador has just said this, Cosmos will close down their investment in Ghana and leave? Do you think that gold buying companies, cocoa buying companies, CBs, license buying companies will close up shop and leave? They won't. And the figures you yourself showed from Uganda is a much smaller economy. And I'd have loved for you to look at the figures from Nigeria. What people fail to realize is that Nigeria in 2015 passed an anti-same-sex marriage bill, similar to what Ghana is passing. Nigeria has had that. The Nigerian government took a stand where they told the American government that they would retaliate for any action taken against the Nigerian state. Because of the posture of the Nigerian government, the American government was careful with sanctions of any such or any kind on the Nigerian government. So it comes back to the posture of the country. It comes back to the stature of the country. Ghana is not Uganda. With the greatest of respect to Uganda, Ghana is the third largest trading partner of the United States in sub-Saharan Africa, behind South Africa and Nigeria. But the US is our fourth trading partner. So Ghana holds a very unique position on the continent, and Ghana cannot be treated like Uganda. It comes back to how we position ourselves. But the point I want to make here is this. Ghana's major exports from the US are what? Cars, poultry, cars and poultry products. That's what we really import from the US, per the US government's own statistics. So that's what I'm saying to you, that look, Virginia Palmer is within her rights to make the comments she's made. But first and foremost, I must state that the things she said about the bill are factually incorrect. They are not true. There's a difference between reading the bill and understanding the bill. She clearly has no understanding of the bill.
I'll come to the substance of the bill as she commented on. I want to stay quickly with on economic issues that he touched on.
On the economic pain, listen, take it from me. The US is within its rights to flex its muscle. But Ghana is a sovereign state. And if you look at the total amount of aid that Ghana received in 2022 from the US, it was $150 million. What percentage of our GDP is that again? Listen, if you put together a few corrupt Ghanaian politicians, they have combined more than $150 million to their name. That's the total amount of aid. So when there's threat of aid being cut, listen, last year we're talking just $150 million US. That's all. So are we going to sell our national identity and sovereignty as a state because of $150 million for an economy whose GDP is nearing $100 billion? That's less than 1% of your GDP.
Well, stay with me, Sam. Let me bring in Michael. Michael, he has a point, as you know, that he makes the point that we can weather the storm if indeed what Virginia Palmer wants ever materializes. You side with that point?
Well, I don't agree with Sam George on
Why don't you?
I don't, because look at the economic situation right now. I mean, this country is broke. I mean, it's broke. It's not like it's funny. We all know the dire state in which our financial situation is in right now. And if you're looking at what we tend to lose in terms of our international trade with other entities, not just the United States, because we are I think we're just kind of talking about this just in the context that is the United States alone. Virginia Palmer is talking about, what she's saying is reflecting the sentiment of other international donors. And they're all saying the same thing. So we need to be very careful. Look, last year, we got $800 million from Agua. Last year. We stand to have another projected $800 million next year, and also for 2025. So we tend to lose, if you look at the Ugandan case, we tend to lose $1.6 billion from the Agua transaction. That is a huge chunk of money that we tend to lose, especially taking into consideration.
How are we going to lose this money? Because we passed an anti-LGBTQ law?
But that is what happened in Uganda. The United States on October 30th decided to take Uganda out of the Agua agreements. So Uganda is no longer part of Agua as we speak. So that is a substantial loss of income, of revenue to the Ugandan government. And they are feeling the pinch in Uganda. So to say that we're going to weather the storm because Cosmos, for instance, might decide to still pursue to do business in Ghana, you are just kind of limiting the argument, just a small segment of what kind of trade we engage in with the United States. We have to move beyond. We have to even look at what our tourism industry is going to suffer from this.
How would that affect the tourism industry?
Well, just think about it. Part of one of the things in the clause is the cross-dressing clause, which basically says that by some weird way of definition that men cannot dress like women cannot dress like men. It's in the clause, right? So by definition, should I decide to even pierce my ear or should a woman decide to wear pants, that's considered to be cross-dressing.
I mean, but that appears to me like a misreading of the act itself. Because if you pierce your ear, I mean, why would that be interpreted as being homosexual?
Well, it's not homosexual. We're not talking homosexual. We're talking cross-dressing. We got to make the distinction. And the fundamental, foundation on which this bill itself has been laid, I feel has been very misleading or has been confusing, because we seem to substitute rights for homosexuality. There are two different things. The homoerotic act of two men engaged in sex has nothing to do with rights. Rights are the bedrock of our democracy.
And we'll come to those substantive issues in the act, which is some George has touched on. But your point is that we cannot afford the economic pain that this will bring, as Virginia Palmer had brought on.
We can.
But I need to put to you, I'll tell enough what my presentation at the beginning. The U.S. ambassador says, well, the consumers, I can no longer vouch for you in the U.S. I cannot sell Ghana anymore. U.S. consumers will not buy Ghanaian goods. And considering that we're exporting more to the U.S. than we're importing, that could be dangerous, right? But then you go to Saudi Arabia with far more draconian anti-gay, and not even laws, it's just societies against it, and they'll stone you to death. U.S. is buying and importing from Saudi Arabia far more, $23 billion worth more of goods than they are actually exporting to Saudi Arabia. There's some hypocrisy there, is it not? That these same U.S. consumers who will not buy our goods because we've passed an anti-gay law cannot get enough of Saudi Arabian goods and services.
Well, I think
shouldn't we then take this with a pinch of salt, these threats to us?
Well, you should look at your position and power in any negotiation. What kind of power do you hold in the negotiation? We always have to come back to that. Yes, Ghana is a sovereign state, but in the space of international negotiations, do we hold the clout that Saudi Arabia has? Saudi Arabia could decide today to say, okay, we are going to cut back on how much oil we are producing, okay? And the whole world will feel the pinch of it. Can we do the same in Ghana? Do we have that clout that Saudi Arabia has? And to get into the point, I feel like sometimes the comparison can be very misleading too. We're talking about a full-fledged democratic society comparing itself to a theocratic society in terms of how it manages itself. So we need to be looking at the reality of the fact. What is the bargaining power in the international space when it comes to Ghana and the United States? Let
me bring in Rabbi Odamiansa. Mr. Odamiansa, now, if you listen to Michael is clear that, we're looking at the U.S. now because the U.S. ambassador has spoken. But the impact she talks about goes beyond the U.S. It goes to the European countries themselves, right? You talk about France, the UK. All of them will have similar reactions to us. And where we are currently, the economic consequences, he talks about AGWA. If you put that number down and you begin to imagine that for a country like us bleeding on a daily basis, this clearly, it's something that we must reconsider. If Virginia Palmer can say what she said there last 2 days publicly, imagine what she's telling our representatives, the finance minister, the government representatives who, of course, in diplomatic circles, they talk quite frequently. For a government that is supervising an economy that is facing the worst economic crisis in a generation, sound bites like what we've had there will mean a lot, which can translate to members in the House who you need to get that bill passed. That is a real challenge that you face now, considering where the economy is.
Well, Evans, let me state emphatically that be it the president, the vice president, or the finance minister, or whoever in government Virginia Palmer is speaking to in private, must know that they owe fidelity to the Ghanaian people, not the U.S. ambassador. That's the first point we need to make. Now, secondly, just before I go into the details of what that portends for Parliament, let me state that, respectfully, I disagree with Michael and the figures he's put out. It's disingenuous to put out headline figures and say that Ghana loses $800 million from AGWA. That's not correct. Last year, we did not get $800 million. Evans, do you know what $800 million will do for Ghana's agriculture? Which part of Ghana's agriculture did we get $800 million? The reality is of the fact that the US government gave Ghana $32 million, $32 million in agricultural aid in 2022, not 800 million. I challenge Michael Odami to show you which inflows of 800 million he's talking about. If they tell you Agua has a potential of 800 million, does it mean that Ghana has used 800 million? And in fact, if you say Agua alone was 800 million in our agri sector, the figures you put out as Ghana's exports, what portion of that is? Does that 800 million fill in? Secondly, respectfully, my brother Michael shows you the point I made that persons against this bill, including the US ambassador, are reading, but there's a difference between reading and understanding. And I know Michael is highly competent, but I mean, for the purposes of whatever agenda that they are pushing, they would choose to read without understanding. He makes reference to cross-dressing in the bill and says that if he pierces his ear and wears an earring, he can be arrested. For someone as educated and highly competent as Michael is, it's most unfortunate to do that. And for the purposes of our viewers and our listeners, let me run a quick crash course in the bill. Section 10 or clause 10 of the bill is titled Prohibition of Gross Indecency. Now, 10.2 says, 10.2c, for purposes of this section, grossly indecent act means intentional cross-dressing to portray that the person is of a gender different from the gender assigned at birth with intent to engage in an act prohibited under this act. Now, for you to establish criminality in common law, you must have the act and the intent. Actus reus and mens rea. The actus reus here is the intentional cross-dressing. Mens rea is the intent. What is the intent behind the dressing? So piercing your ear alone does not mean that you're falling foul of this law. But piercing your ear and dressing as a woman with the intent to commit an act that is prohibited, not just any act, but a specific act prohibited under this law. And what are the acts prohibited under this law? They are found in Section 6. This is an act of parliament, though. It's not a storybook. It's an act of parliament. Section 6 says, a person commits an offense under this act if they hold out as a lesbian, a gay, a transgender, a transsexual, a queer, a pansexual, an ally, or a non-binary person. So you can only be found guilty by a competent court of jurisdiction if you are prosecuted for intentional cross-dressing to portray yourself as a person of a different gender. If your intent was to portray yourself as one of the 7 or 8 gender identities that this law finds regressive. But if you are a man, for example, Evans, you are a man and you decide that you want to take part in one of George Weafi's stage play or Uncle Ebo White's stage play, and as a man you are acting as a woman, your intent is to entertain your guest. Your intent is not to portray yourself as a transgender. Your intent is to carry out an educational and entertainment purpose. This law does not hold you liable for anything. This is the misrepresentation. In fact, it is intentional disinformation and misinformation by persons who ought to know better. The US ambassador is guilty of it. Michael in your studio is guilty of it. And several other persons who are pushing this. Look, and I'll end on the question you asked. Will this have any effect on members of parliament? I have said this several times, and the Speaker of Parliament did say when we did the second reading of this bill. There is no member of parliament who can stand on the floor of the House of Parliament and say that they will vote or fight against this bill.
Yeah, but they will not say that publicly. But if it comes down to a vote,
I'm telling you this because the speaker did it when we did the second reading. The speaker said any member of parliament who is opposed to the bill at the second stage of reading, he gave the floor that they should rise and speak. Your cameras were there.
Nobody did. Yes, nobody did.
Nobody did. Because you cannot. Because you see, Evans, I don't sit in parliament because I am Sam George and I am handsome. No, I know I'm handsome, yes, but it's not my fineness that took me to parliament. It's that the people of Ningo Pram Pram voted for me. And that's why before I brought this bill to Parliament, I met with my 2 traditional councils and held 18 town hall meetings in Ningo Pram Pram to ensure that I had the support of the people who voted for me, because I knew the weight of the bill I was going to push. No member of Parliament will come there. If you come to Parliament and come and speak your mind, that is up to you. But bear in mind that you sit in that chair in Parliament for a constituency that has chiefs, has pastors, has imams, has traditional authority and religious people, and even atheists. And you will go back to them and answer to them. And your voice on the floor must be representative of the people who send you. And I say to you on authority that of all the 275 constituencies in Ghana, the National House of Chiefs has representation in every single constituency. The 4th public symposium that this bill had in Kumasi was sponsored by the National House of Chiefs, where the president of the National House of Chiefs, Ojiawowo JB II, himself came to speak and said that the National House of Chiefs is fully behind this because there is no traditional area in Ghana that supports homosexuality. So, Evans, I can say on authority that no MP speaking the minds of his people can come to Parliament and say they are voting against this because of visa or because of what some think tank or what the ambassador is saying.
Let me hear from Michael. Michael on the point.
I hear all that some judge is saying, but what I think is happening, which we sometimes we don't want to say, is that Parliament, as we have it today, when it comes to this issue, is beholden to the religious bloc. It is the religious bloc that is driving this agenda. And it's more so because if you look at the way our country is today, our political elite have more so ceded much of their power to be able to act instrumentally in the way the Constitution requires to make laws, and have ceded that space to the religious bloc. So a lot of these talking points in this bill that some judge is talking about, they are all just religious talking points.
But you make religious talking points, but the CDD's own research shows that overwhelming majority of Ghanaians favor some judge's position. So even if it's religious, it's a representation of the majority view.
I do not disagree with that. But the point I'm trying to make is that we need to make a clear distinction between tinkering with rights and also criminalizing an act. They are 2 different things. Homosexuality, which some judge wants to criminalize, it's an act that goes against, it's not, think about it. The state deals with crimes. The church deals with sin. But to carry the morality of the issue of sin and to make it a crime, I think it's problematic for democratic dispensation. And we have to start making that distinction. Then how do we criminalize an identity? Who does that? How do you in any sense criminalize an identity? To say that, okay, a time will come.
But the law we already have criminalizes on natural carnal knowledge. That's also sinful.
The law does not confer rights. The criminal code does not confer rights. The Constitution is the macro right document.
Yeah, but the fundamental point you make is that there's a sin and then there's a law, and that you cannot take the sinful act, which the church obviously should be condemning, and make it into a law, right? But we already have that in our act. That's why I'm just mentioning to you. So that argument, then of course,
so that is what makes this whole bill problematic for me personally, because if I'm thinking, look, CDD position. It's not whether this is, CDD is not out here advocating that men can go have sex. That has nothing to do with the issue. For us, it is a human rights issue. It's the same way that should any minority suffer such injustice from society, we will go to bat for that same person. It doesn't really matter. It could be some judge himself tomorrow, and I could go bat for him if his rights are violated, or if in any way society decides that they want to regularize the state in a way that they will punish him for being who he is.
What about his Agua point, that the 800 million doesn't represent the facts?
Well, it could be that we are looking at data from different places, but this is coming from the Agua platform.
And what does he say? If you have the data, just go through that, because he says, obviously, that the 800 million cannot begin to represent what the trade value is with that. Okay, whilst you look for that, I'm going to take a quick break. When I return, I'll hear from Rabbi Odame and of course, Michael also to wrap up on this important conversation. As we've been hearing from the U.S. ambassador to Ghana, Virginia Palmer, laid out in very clear terms for us what the economic cost will be to Ghana if we dare go ahead and pass the anti-LGBTQ Act. Stay with me. Discussing what we heard from the U.S. ambassador going public with her own concerns, saying she will struggle to defend Ghana, to sell Ghana to the international community and to U.S. investors because we are pressing ahead with the passage of the anti-LGBTQ bill. And my guest in the studio is Michael, of course, with the CDD. We have Rabbi Odame and Son Head Servant, Grace House Chapel International, and we have Sam George also with us. Let me go to Sam George very quickly because we just have a few minutes to wrap up. Sam, so we've heard from the U.S. ambassador. We've talked about, you say you don't worry that this will affect your situation in Parliament as far as the bill is concerned. But I'm very curious, as we speak tonight, where are we with the bill?
Well, the bill is just about to go through its amendments, but because of the budget, those have been put on hold once we're done with the budget. So hopefully in the first meeting of next year, we'll be able to do that. But Evans, if I could just quickly on the legal issue, because Michael makes that point again. Michael, respectfully, no rights accrue in our constitution to anybody on the basis of the agenda or the agenda identity. There is absolutely nowhere in the constitution of Ghana and in any international statute anywhere in the world, and I've done my homework on this, I'm challenging anybody to show me any international covenant, any international convention, or any international treaty, or the Constitution of Ghana that imposes or bestows a right on the basis of gender or gender identity. And I did that at the UN speech I gave. All rights accrue to people on the basis of sex. In fact, if you take the 1992 Constitution, Article 39 of the Constitution places a duty on the states to ensure that we integrate the appropriate customary values. Customary values are determined by the National House of Chiefs. I've just told you what the National House of Chiefs says. And so it is incorrect for anybody to suggest that there are rights being trampled. Gender identities do not give you a right. And Michael, you cannot have rights on the basis of something that is not universally accepted. That's why when you take the UN Declaration on Human Rights, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, they are bestowed because they are globally accepted principles. There are 30 rights. Those rights are accepted globally everywhere. Gender identity is not one of them.
Okay, Michael?
I want to respond to that. So it tells me that Sam George obviously does not understand the Constitution. The Ghana Constitution specifically states that we cannot discriminate against anybody on certain categories, one of them being gender, right? He said he's read the Constitution. So I'm probably thinking that he used the concept sex, right? You heard him say sex, right? If you go back to 1969 Constitution, under the provisions of rights, sex was a category for protection. 1979 Constitution, sex. 1992 Constitution, gender. That should tell you something. And the Constitution in this application is a neutral document. Probably some judge doesn't know that. That is why when the Constitution says religion, it doesn't say Christian or Muslim. So when it says gender, it is inclusive of identities of people who might be different. So his understanding of the Constitution is flawed in the first place. And then let me also give him another briefly. So he keeps talking about natural rights. So all the Sam George is talking about is natural rights. And I feel like he still hasn't gotten the concept of how rights emerge in a polity. Look, there are 4 different ways that we can talk about rights. 4 different ways. And one of them being natural rights. There's also deliberative rights. Those come from deliberation. If he has read John Hobbes, the Leviathan, why we created a social contract so men could give up certain rights so that we could have a stable society through deliberation. There's also protest rights. These comes from rights from social injustices in society. The Civil Rights Act movement, women's rights, these are protest rights. And then we have discourse rights. Discourse rights emerge from societies where people who have power decide that others shouldn't have rights. And that is exactly where we are with this bill.
It's not possible that Africans can move forward without coming out clearly and having a clear stance when it comes to LGBTQ. because it's becoming a hot topic all around the globe. It is important that laws are made, and they are made based on what the people want. And that's what is very disturbing to me when I heard Virginia Palmer talking. Because if we are saying that we want democracy, and democracy has been defined, there is a clear definition of what democracy is all about. So one of those democratic rules, which is even a universal democratic principle, is that democracy is considered to be the voice of the majority. That's one of the principles of democracy, is the voice of the majority. So if the majority have accepted that this is what we want, then there is just no reason why somebody from somewhere or from a different democracy will come and tell the Africans that no, it is not correct. Could be a consequence of my ignorance, but I don't really think that all European nations have accepted the aspect of the LGBTQ to be a normal thing. What we really hate as Africans is when the world thinks that we should be imposed values. Some people are really of the opinion that the transgenderism generally, or the transgender feeling, is a psychological abnormality. So if it is targeted from that angle, I think it has to start. The problem is therefore coming from the family more than it's coming from any other segment of society.
Yes. To begin with, Tega, it is very true that in the colonial times, activities of gay, lesbian, homosexual activities were criminalized. And to an extent, even Ghana, we had such laws prior to 1962. In fact, Tega, if you take the global statistics, homosexual acts are criminalized in 70 countries globally. 70 countries. And then out of these 70 countries, 11 of such countries impose death penalty, or have either killed someone through acts of homosexual violence. So when you take the number of countries that have criminalized it, that's 70. And looking at the number of countries in the world, 195 plus. So you see the number is significantly low. So that means that the numbers that are proponents to this are very minimal. Tega, I would also say that we would have divergent views today because of the way I'm going to project my argument. Yes, I want to state emphatically that I am not a proponent of LGBT. In fact, I am an advocate of polygamy. But the point you raised, that some see it to be genetically inclined, or to have some sort of abnormality, is genuine. So if we take that into consideration, that is genuine, and we as Africans are trying to pass laws that are draconian, that will hurt people who belong to this sexual orientation because of a genetic problem, what then are we doing to ourselves? Naturally, Tega, there are even a plethora of animals that belong to a gay orientation. An example is a bonobo. A bonobo is a particular species of monkey. And the bonobos are our near relatives, they are near cousins. Bonobos were never in Sodom or Gomorrah. So how did they become gay? Apart from bonobos, some lions are gay, giraffes, penguins, and a whole lot more, foxes. So if we see that or being homosexual in one aspect can be caused by genetics, then we have to try to see how we can curb that in that respect. Now, if we pass a draconian bill or a law, that becomes an act and it is criminalized. If people of such orientations have genuine consent, they will be afraid to come out because it is criminal already. So you see the point I'm coming from, Tega. We need to have another look at this. Yes, it is true that some don't even have it acquired genetically. And if I say genetically, I would want to say that there are some hormones. I'm trying to let us go lay. There are some hormones that are responsible for secondary sexual characteristics in males, and then also in females. So if it happens that you're a male and you have more female, hormones in you, estrogen is what the sciences call it in you. You'll see that physically to manifest. You'll be a man, but you have female characteristics, and physically you may not be drawn to man. A female, but to a man because you have a lot of estrogen in you. Similar, if you're a female and you have testosterone, the male characteristics will manifest in you. If you have more testosterone, the male characteristics will manifest. So what do? Do you jail the person 5 years for having that has manifested in him or her? I'm saying 5 years per the bill. I've read the bill that is in Parliament awaiting passage. And in Ghana, we are even better. Uganda, death penalty. You see, for those who engage in same and those who also advocate same, death penalty. And as we speak, 6 people are actually facing the law in that regard in Uganda. Yes, in Ghana, we have actually we've taken a step. When I read the memorandum and the bill, there's an aspect for people to be corrected. There's an aspect. I just can't recollect the caption, but
That's
it
corrected
seems
psychologically, medically, and otherwise.
yes, it's more psychologically. So they, according when you look at the reasoning, they see it to be psychological. So there's a correctional facility, a correction center. I think that has been provided for. I will dig it out and get the full caption, but that has been made available in our bill. Uganda's act, I haven't perused it to the entirety of it, so I don't know if there's any provision to correct such people. But you see, this discussion, we are even talking about the genetics of it. Now, it is true that some might acquire it environmentally, maybe in schools, at the workplace, and then inter alia. So, suppose someone goes to school, especially a mixed, single sex school, according to my research. And Tega, in my writing career, my writing history, I have met lots of people. That is what I do. I meet people, I interact with them, and it forms my writing. I've come across a lot of people who belong to this orientation, and I have sat down and I've understood them. Tega, the more you get to know them, the more you get to understand them, the more you get to like. You see, they are good for some of them, really genuine. So, as I was talking, there are some who may acquire it through schools, through jobs, and all those stuff. So, suppose that person acquires that through peer influence in one way or the other. Yes, the person has acquired something we shun upon, I think is bad. But must we criminalize it? Must we punish the person? No. So, I like the idea that we are upholding our African values. I like the fact that we are propagating it to the younger generation. But criminalizing it is an unreasonable approach because this is something we are seeing as a menace and we want to curb. So if you want to curb the menace, you have to understand it. You don't tackle if you want to tackle it head on. You will experience resistance. Even in the United States, it was same. A lot of people are so they shone on it. But until 1997, there was this celebrity called Ellen DeGeneres. She's a popular TV host,
Yeah, I
and
know.
those who belong to our generation, she came out openly. She came out openly to say she was gay. You see, and that opened the chance. So if we are also trying to do same, one day you never know who might pop up. to be a celebrity or a president or a minister or something, to openly pop up and then say I am this, and to start gathering another alliance. You see, so instead of us criminalizing it in the first place, let's try to find ways of curbing it.
If you were to provide a suggestion on what should be done specifically to make sure that the people who are involved in this kind of orientation are not, or the whole thing is not criminalized, what will be the way forward?
If I were in charge of affairs, I would first of all try to get the data of all people who belong to such an orientation. So we don't approach it as though it is even a sickness or it is something bad, but there's an avenue for all people who belong to this orientation. You know, everyone is entitled to belong to a union in Ghana and globally. So yes, there's this union, or there's this, this peer group that has been formed, that is legal, that will have a cabal, that would have a concentration of these people. So they have monthly meetings, weekly meetings, yearly meetings, and through these, these meetings, through this things that will implant people that will reorient them, will implant people that will take them through this psychological trauma, if you see it as it is. Because mind you, it's not all of them that aspire. A lot love it, and some don't also like it. So those who like it, if you still criminalize it, are you trying to deny them of you get it? Because we say human beings, we all have our free will to do whatever. So if you criminalize anal sex, and he goes and marries a woman and he's having it warm through her anus, what about that? Yeah, so if I were to suggest an approach to curbing this, I would suggest that we have a legal platform for all who belong to this sexual orientation. We admit them as such, we acknowledge them, we accept them, we let them know they are unique, and we now plant in our people, our psychologists, our medical people, our traditional people, our herbalists, whatsoever think can help reform them. Then we reform them instead of criminalizing them. What about that, Tega?
In history, it's been proven that human beings want to have sex with everything. Even trees, they just want to have sex with everything. So if the aspect of sex does not really come into law, there's a tendency that human beings can do anything. You know, the aspect of reorientation is very good. Why don't we really have these laws of orientation focus on, for example, those who have penises? It is very clear that nature has given you the opportunity, or has given you the mandate to become a man, because we are not born perfect. Neither were things created perfect. Rules or principles were made perfect, but the things themselves were not made perfect. This means that many things were created, but they have to grow to become matured or perfected. So when someone is born and is born a male, it does not necessarily mean that he will act like a male. To perfect his masculinity means that the person begins to try to become a male. That is, you build yourself. So somebody will tell me that, oh, this is how God created me. No, so what? God created you. What have you now created of yourself? But people need to know that they have the responsibility to create part of themselves. God creates part and they create the rest. In fact, they are the ones to maturate their character. They are the ones to maturate their personality. This is where the aspect of gender and sex really intertwine and makes things extremely difficult. Everything in the universe is almost male and female, very few exceptions. I know of slugs, I know of snails, I know of earthworms. I even know that things like hyenas, sometimes they look very general. You will not tell what is a male hyena and what is a female hyena. If you look at them, and when the female is pregnant, then you can figure out this hyena is a female hyena. When it comes to human beings have to realize that they are meant to be maturated. They are meant to create themselves. The part that God does not create is the part that human beings create, which involves personality and which involves character. We build our character to be marked, to be perfected character or better character before we move on with life. We don't say, this is how I was created, and so I'm good. So am I good? No. We build up our character and our personality. With the advancement of medical science, we can even go further. If somebody is given a penis, that is a clear sign nature has made that person a male. Therefore, that person has to build the characteristics of a male and maturate himself to become a male. And before it was difficult, aspects of homosexuality could be permitted, but especially not now, because we've got the possibilities to build up if he's a male, then he's supposed to build up more of his testosterone than estrogens. So, and other things which science can handle now. Therefore, we should focus on how to build that person, help the person to become a male, instead of trying to now deform the person and complicating the person's life. There is a man who is over that. I think we should watch that video.
I never fit. I was an alpha female, a sales executive that kind of just didn't fit in any box. When psychologists or somebody that I was in love with or whatever said that I was in the wrong body, I started to think, well, maybe I am. I'm a biological woman that medically transitioned to appear like a male through synthetic hormones and surgery. I will never be a man. Is it transphobic for me to tell the truth? Why is it that a couple hundred years from now, if you dug up my body, they're gonna go, yeah, that was a woman, had babies.
Can you tell me about the procedures that you had?
I've had 7 surgeries. I've had 1 stress heart attack. I've had a helicopter life ride with a pulmonary embolism. I've had 17 rounds of antibiotics. I had 6 inches of hair on the inside of my urethra for 17 months. Nobody would help me, including the doctor that did this to me because I lost my insurance. I get infections every 3 to 4 months. I'm probably not gonna live very long. Promoting that.
And what?
That's a phalloplasty. That's a bottom surgery. We have 5 children's hospitals in the United States telling girls that they can be boys at $70,000 a pop in a surgery that has a 67% complication rate. That will kill me from infection that I can't sue on. We're butchering a generation of children because nobody's willing to talk about anything. I have 3 kids. At the age that they're doing this to kids. I'm not transphobic. I love my kids, and I love other people's kids, and you should too. This is wrong on so many levels.
You see, this man used to be a woman, and then he decides that he's going to become a man. The kinds of trouble he's going through, I think you have just listened to what he has gone through. It's just too much. It's too much to bear. And
so you see,
at this moment, let me just run up. At this moment, they are even going to the level of mutilating kids in America, removing their genitals and replacing them. You know, this is child abuse. Parents decide that they are going to change their children's sexual orientation or their sexes, and begin to carry knife. They carry the knife and in the hospital and let the doctor begin to do this rubbish on the child. We have got all the possibility to form this child to become the man, because you see, when you are born, your parents have a responsibility to mold you up, to mold your character up as well. But the parents' responsibility should not go against God's design. When you have been given a penis, what the parents should be doing rather is to see what can be, exactly what should be done, so that such an individual can become a round or rounded male. This is what they should be doing rather with the sciences that are there presently. But we're rather doing the reverse. You saw the journalist trying to compare a theocratic state, which is Islamic theocratic state, and Ghana. No. Once you do that, you are missing the point. The reason why the Americans are not talking so much about that particular theocratic state is because they already know that it's a no-go area. They know very well that there is a theocratic state. But they assume that if we are following the values which the West has handed to us, so we should represent them well. You know what I'm saying? They gave us those values. That is why the aspect. Before I let you speak, please. That is why the aspect. Yeah. That is why the aspect of African power becomes very important. Because if we've got the power, we can speak. They have handed to us values that we have embraced, and we seem to love them. Otherwise, why don't we modify what we think that is the best for us? I mean that as a continent, because when we do that as a continent, then it sends a clear lesson to them that this is how we want to be, and nobody is going to change that. But as it stands now, we will be squeezed. Ghana can be held on the neck, on the scrotum. They are weak nations, economically and otherwise. But if the Africans come together, they can stand, they can take a position and say, this is what we want. We shall be coming back in the next few minutes. Please don't go away. Don't also fail to subscribe. It is time for Africans to be thinking about reshaping our democracy. And frankly speaking, we cannot do that in these small states that we are. We don't even have the luxury to do that. It's going to be impossible to do that because our democracy is sponsored. This is where democracy really has its limitations as well. Because at the end of the day, it is the one who pays the piper who determines the tune. Our democracy is funded. We don't take care of ourselves. We can take care of ourselves. If Africa is united, if Africa trades among its states, if our economy is strong, then we can be able to have a say. We can be able to decide on what our principles are going to do. This is a typical example. What has happened to us now is a typical example of what will continuously be our story, even for the next generations, if we don't come together as one continent. If we don't do the right thing, we'll toe the line of what the West has provided, has put on the table. That is the menu that we're going to eat. And therefore, it is the high time we begin to look at the aspect of the African unity, not just within those context of the fact that we are going to have a strong country, no, but also those socio-economic aspects, those social aspects that are affecting our lives. How can they tell you that you will marry a man and that is normal? And they want to make it a law. Like I said, children, as we grow up, just like animals, if you see goats, for example, you see a male goat wants to climb on another male goat. They kid like that, they do like that, but they don't go to level where they have those kinds of relations. For human beings, they used to go to that level as they are growing up, but they have to maturate themselves. They have to come to the level where they know that they count. The society has a responsibility for the people, but the human beings individually also have a responsibility for the family and the society. And that part of that responsibility is what they represent. How they represent that society in front of the world, the culture, the traditions, the social aspects of that society, how they represent that society. How are Africans representing Africa? How do we really want the world to look at us? What are the values that are not only good values for the African people? What has made us strong all this while? What are some of those values? We need to put them on the table. Look at the ones that could be very, very difficult to adapt at this moment. Look at the ones that can be adopted. But what I'm saying is that it cannot be done. We cannot do that. We cannot arrive there if we are weak. Who's going to sponsor those conferences? Yes. Who's going to sponsor those programs if they have to be programmed? Who's going to sponsor projects that have to do with reorientation or whatsoever? That's where money comes in, and that's where Africa is supposed to really get connected.
A very interesting point about the money. So let me start from the last input about the money, okay. And I'll take it from there. So about the money, if we criminalize it in the first place, where are we going to get money to be taking care of prison inmates? as I was saying, in Ghana, the law, the bill, it hasn't been passed into law yet, so it is a bill. Until it's passed, then it becomes an act of parliament where we call it a law. So it stipulates 5 years imprisonment for any person engaged in such, any person or group of persons engaged in such, and also 5 years for people who would want to advocate same. They even there's even a provision for, you have the responsibility to report any such conduct, and if you get that, so there's also a duty to all Ghanaians to report such conduct. Okay, so now when we criminalize it, you know what happens when we criminal prosecutions? It takes money, okay, because it is going to be, if it's a criminal offense, then it means that it is you against the state, and then the state has lawyers that will come, and then all these things take there are charges involved. When the person is in prison, the person eats morning, afternoon, evening. There are charges involved. So comparing these costs to cost of reorientation, which one do you think is more plausible?
Definite reorientation.
Aside that, yes, and aside that, yes, and even aside the cost, looking at how to the convenience, which one is best, which one will reform the person best, is the reorientation. So now that's the last point. Now coming to we inculcating Western cultures into us. You see, if we don't take time, we'll end up spinning in circles forever and never again. You see, it is acknowledged that we took this culture, the Western culture, Christianity, we absorbed it into our culture. Okay, we absorbed it, and now we uphold it even more than they came and taught us about Christianity. I mean, if our friends are now beginning to redefine it, that okay, yes, we came with this, and then we've seen that there's a second thought to it. Why shouldn't we also think same? Because yes, if we assume without admitting that we absorbed their culture and there are certain things that were not right about it, okay, and we have seen it, it's prima facie, it's evident enough. It means that they have also realized that there are certain things, provisions that they had prior or that were no good, and they are beginning to read it. So why don't we sit, observe, and see what happens as they legalize this here and there? Then we look at it, the process. We look at what we look at what has happened. Then we can inform ourselves. But they are coming up with an agenda, and we are also busily fighting against it instead of trying to understand the merits of it. It could be that it's a bad agenda. It could also be that it's a good agenda. You never know. So if we are sitting on the fence, we shouldn't try to be holier than the Pope or cry than the bereaved. This is just from my 5 streets.
My biggest worry is the kind of systems that we have, the kinds of democracy that we have. In other words, we have decided to embrace democracy without, in fact, we've done it hook and sink, without any filters. We've not been able to look at it deeply. We've not been able to work on it. And like I rightly said, it's so difficult to work on it because we are still very divided and weak, because we don't sponsor our activities. Politics has been monetized. This is where money is found for me to be able to get enough of it and be able to corrupt or be able to change the minds of my people. I'm going to do that. If I'm a politician, right? If I'm a politician, that's exactly what I would do, right? That's what a normal politician would do. Except those who are standing very, very firm on values. And let me tell you what happens with those who stand very firm on values. They go nowhere. They don't move.
They certainly go nowhere.
Yes, they don't move forward with
certainly go nowhere.
Yes, good part of our African systems need to be reignited and be infused in our democracy in one way. I don't know how that's going to be done, but definitely in the future, as we begin to brood or begin to think, we begin to work together to see what can be done about it. I'm sure we're going to arrive at better solutions. I don't like a democracy that we can, today I'm this way, tomorrow I'm that way, and I can go against values. I can go against my national values for political expediency. These are exactly our problems, because let me tell you, we're just kidding. We are just kidding as small African countries. We are moving towards what they are. All those things they are putting in place in their countries, we are going to go there. We are weak and small nations. We will arrive there in one way or the other because they know what to do and they never stop. They never give up. You may think they're giving up. They will never give up. One way out is for us to be able to come together, find ways to be strong. You wanted to say something? Continue.
Yeah, so Tega agreed. I agree with the point you make that the only way is to come as a united force. Now, let's just take the statistics. Africa, for instance, the only country that I am aware of that can come out bold to say they have passed an anti-gay bill is Uganda. You see, Ghana is trying to follow suit, and even the proponents of it, of this private members bill, Sam George and a few others, and lawyer Poor Money, are facing a huge lot of resistance.
Look at the hell they are giving to Uganda now.
You see, so if we are going to tackle it this way, we are just few out of how many countries in Africa. So that's what I'm saying. If we want to rush and say that we are holier than the Pope, and we pass a bill into law, and as you said, we are a small nation, we are now developed. Sanctions that will come on us is one thing. Another thing, even what we'll be doing to ourselves, as to our own brothers and sisters, is another. Because as we said earlier, some of these are genetically inclined. Some of these are psychologically inclined. So must you put someone behind bars because the person is not completely together up there? If that were the case, then all our brothers who do not have their mental faculties together should be put behind bars. I am not even saying that acts of these seem to suggest that you don't have your mental faculties together. That's not what I'm saying, but that is what a whole lot of people. So if that is what a whole lot of people, we should be careful with this. If we want to be united, then we have to come out strong. So it's just like when you are in the sea and then the waves are coming. When you hold hands together, it's difficult for you to be taken away. But if you want to do it alone, so right now, which countries have we consulted that are also far behind us that we can stand and say that, oh, since we are doing this, we are doing that together? No. So you see, there's one thing that in anything you do in life, you have to always have mind over matter. It is true that in Ghana, most of us proud over this. A lot of people will be very emotional when things like this come. A lot of people cannot even fathom, cannot even imagine. But that will be your emotions you are pouring out. And in situations such as passing laws, things that will govern universal good, you don't have to delve much into emotions. You have to have a cognitive sense of reasoning. It has to be logical enough. I tell you what, good and bad is subjective. Anything someone sees good here might be bad somewhere, and the vice versa. So when you are passing laws, you also have to have things in consideration. Like I said, I uphold our African custom, but then criminalizing LGBTQ plus is an unreasonable approach. I tell you what, there are still a lot of resistant groups in countries that we say have legalized same-sex marriage. As I said, even in the United States of America, it took there's this group called something for the it will come to me. It's a very strong group that are in association with another group called Go Citizen. So Go Citizen is Spanish. The American coalition, I'm trying to get the name, but so that is that. And then in Ghana, we also have others like that. So we have all these societies that are fighting against them. So It isn't that it's not like just as simple as it is, and it isn't that when we also when you even go to the United States, for instance, there are some families that when you try to say you are gay or suggest that you support sin, you'll be thrown out of the house.
Yeah,
You'll be thrown out.
yeah, but if emotions are kept aside and statistics are taken into consideration, for example, you realize that the perfect things in the universe are the rules, the principles, to be more precise, the principles that guide nature. The creation itself grows to perfection. So the principle guides nature, or the principles, they guide nature towards perfection. The aspect of good and evil comes when human beings begin to completely go the reverse of what the principle is targeting. What is the principle targeting? How do we attain that maturation? So that's where good aspect of good and evil comes about. And as you rightly said, there are sometimes objectives based on society. They decide on what is good, what is evil. But once we look at it based on nature, we cannot be missing the point. We will stick on the point. If we look at the genitalia statistics, for example, in each 1,000 to 1,500 to 2,000 human beings born on Earth, you have one who is abnormal in this format, especially having something like two sexes. You have two people born with two sexes, male, female sexes, and sometimes these two sexes,
hermaphrodites.
Yes, these two sexes act. I mean, they're active. They are quite active to the two sexes. We know of this lady is it Tanzania also? Yeah, I think Tanzania or Kenya. The total number of people whose bodies differ from standard male or female, that is 1 in 100 births. There's 1 in 100 births where then the total number of people receiving surgery to normalize genital appearance, you have 1 or 2 in 1,000 births. So you have exceptions like this ones. You have cases like this ones that are very, very difficult to handle. And that's why criminalizing issues like this become a little bit very, very complex. Rather, there is so much that can be done at the level of the social aspect, and the government can emphasize more on that. So much talking can be directed on that. The only problem is if things are not put right, if things are not really put right, especially into law, there's a tendency for these people to be discriminated, even killed, or you know what I'm saying? That is, if the law says that they have to be their orientations have to be reoriented and things like that, there must also be laws to protect them. And these are some of the things the West is looking into. You get the point? These are some of the things that the West is looking into. They are looking at the possibility of people being killed, being traumatized. Like you have people who will be accused of witchcraft, and then people will go inside, and before you know it, an old woman is beaten to death because they say she is a witch. These are some of the things. So therefore, this thing is a very complicated issue. It's a very complicated topic because it looks at our traditions, our cultures, and then at the same time it holds a part of freedoms and some of these excesses which we used to have in Africa and things like that. So we have to look at it cautiously and find the best way of handling it. The best way of handling it. I think that the nations that went for criminalizing it have not taken their time to study it enough. They have not taken their time to work on it enough. They have not taken the time to sensitize. Let me come here by saying something about the family, because this is where all the problems are coming from. Civilization stemmed from the family setup, when Homo sapiens thought that there is need to always be in families and live as organized families. Then they started creating societies that are also organized. This is how civilization emerged. Civilization has to bear the fruits of what an enlightened man should be like. It definitely means that we must go back to the family setup. In the family, there are 4 realms. When you finally have passed through these 4 realms in the family, you automatically can fit in the society without a lot of issues of being social misfit or having some of these problems that we're having. Most of these problems are caused by the breakdown of the family. Most of these problems, if we look at it critically, you see that either because when a child is growing up, there is the first realm, which is the filial realm. That's the filial piety realm, which is the child's love towards the parents. The aspect of bringing up a child to become a matured person and the child responding to your love that you are given through services, that heart towards the parents, where the child wants to serve the parents and even die for the parents, that kind of heart, that is the filial piety which is required for each child to build, because by so doing, they are building at the same time their own character. Then there is an aspect of another realm, which is the fraternal realm, the realm where you have the siblings. When a child is growing up without the two siblings, that is the two sexes in the home, there's that tendency of being a little bit deformed. There's that tendency of being, when I say deformed, I'm not talking about physically or even mentally, but having more knowledge about this other sex more than the other, more than how the other aspect of the other sex behaves and how they are, and sometimes even how they should relate to them. So, excuse my word of deformed. You see that if a child can be able to love his parents very well, serve his parents very well, there's a tendency of the love between brothers and sisters or the love of siblings to be very strong, because there's an anchor. Now, between the parents, you have the male parent and you have the female parents, and between the siblings, you have the female and you have the male. We learn. There is a book that tries to describe where men come from and where women come from. This book tries to explain the nature of men that make them exactly what they are, what influence men to behave the way they behave. So the child grows up understanding these aspects and learning on both sides. This is how the child grows up and develops the two levels of realms or hearts. And these are the tools the child needs to confront the society. And then the child lives from that level of these two hearts that he has perfected or she has perfected and enters a different realm, which is now the conjugal realm. At the conjugal realm, the child is able to understand the wife, if he's a male, because of the fact that he has already been before with the sister and the mother. And even the character, the way he behaves, because he's been with his father, he's been with his brothers. This is how a man should behave. This is how we should behave. It cannot be neutral. It can't. It is the responsibility of the family. It is the responsibility of the parents. It's the responsibility of that nucleus generally to build each other. Because this person was just a child. Now he's an adult or she's an adult. She has a husband or a wife now, and she begins to train the heart towards perfection. That's towards perfection of understanding. Because we live for the greater good, which means living for the sake of others. Which means that the first order is the person who is right beside you. Your purpose of existence is fulfilled by living for the greater good or living for the sake of others. The order is the person who is beside you. When the Bible, for example, talks about when 2 or 3 are gathered, that 2 or 3 is first of all your family, your partner. So the person who is standing in front of you is building your character, because definitely is going to make you angry. Definitely is going to do certain strange things against you, and you are going to find a way on how you are going to deal with that. And then you begin to build this character that will enable you to really confront now what we call the society at the level of the adults, the elites, or the big guys in the societies, and how you should comport yourself, how you should go into culture and all of that, how you should maintain it and how you should pass it down, all of that. Then the next realm will be what? The next realm will be the parental heart, because before you know it, children begin to come. Now, the aspect of having male female children, which is very important, which parents should know, because they also have a different way that they behave, and you need to learn and maturate your character, not by reading books, All the universities cannot give you what a family can give to you. And this is what you pick up to now pass down to the next generation. But once this order of things is distorted, civilization will be distorted, governance will be distorted, and we are going to have this kind of wokeness that we are having presently. We are looking for solutions in the wrong places.
Tega, I tell you what, you make very interesting analysis there, talking about the complete family setup. When you even look into global statistics, you would notice that a lot of people who face abusive marriages are people who've had marriages with people who grew up in a single parenthood or a setting in a similar fashion. And you would also notice that those who grew with both parents and with siblings of both sex, when they marry, you notice the difference. So then, what do we do in case of LGBTQ? What we do is that we rather try to pass a law that will seek to inculcate proper family settings in Ghanaians.
Right. That's why
because
this bill. That's why this bill is specific. It's talking about, or it's a wholesome. It's talking about the LGBTQ aspect and family values as well. So these guys are sat for long. They thought about this thing for a very long time. I think they did. But what I don't know is the aspect of criminalization. But again, look at it, because we're freely speaking. Look at it. Do you give people rights, freedoms, authorities, and whatever without having to punish them if they go wrong?
So, fine. It's good that the caption is so good on that bill that we are looking at proper family values. But then, what is the content in the bill? The content I am disturbed by is the aspect of criminalizing it and even imposing 5 years. It is, we've said this time and time again, over and over again. It is something we don't all kowtow to. So if the aspect of criminalizing is taken out of the bill, me personally, I'm okay, because I so uphold our African concept. So we need to, we need to always get these things right. Otherwise, we will end up going in circles, as I said earlier. We'll end up not tackling it. So yes, if it is a bill that we are bringing to curb this menace, and we know that the menace starts from the family is the basic root of all this, then the bill should be specific. We shouldn't be going around circles. That this is the title, the caption of the bill. The bill is supposed to come to enact proper sexual orientation and family values in us. And when you read the content, it is criminal in nature. Things will not work this way if we want to make things so I think we have to, and I understand why there's a lot of brouhaha in parliament about it. A lot of people are beginning to rethink. A lot of parliamentarians are beginning to rethink. There are some might come, and then you see in Africa we have lots of hypocrites. We have lots and lots of hypocrites. There are people that I side with what I'm saying, but they are afraid to come out and say. So happens in all institutions, in our workplaces, in schools, in parliaments, between friends, even in families. So the mere fact that it is taking this long and people are having problems, and people like Sam George and lawyer Fu Abuaning and the others are being victimized, means that there's a lot of people are also beginning to have a second thought.
Yes, and
we have to.
Yeah,
and we need to meet each other halfway. There's no always one way to be dominant in issues like this. The world in which we live is even a balance. Everything, you need a balance to survive. Your temperature has to be balanced in a way. You see that everything has to be balanced. Everything has to be balanced. So if we are carrying something like this, we have to balance it. Otherwise, we are going to crash. There's going to be a collision.
Okay, so when you're talking about balance, I'm sure you are saying that what you mean. Well, if I want to get it right, is that you are still insisting that rather institutions should be put in place, social institutions should be put in place, or educational institutions should be put in place for reorientation. That is specifically what you are saying, and that
especially the social welfare.
Then,
They have to. I don't remember the last time I heard of social welfare in Ghana. I don't think if they are existing or they are moribund.
Okay, so we
And
will.
if they exist, do they are they furnished enough to be able to look into it? There are institutions that are available, but they are moribund. We are prioritizing other things.
Okay, so we will be coming back in a few minutes. Please don't go away. Don't fail to subscribe. We have the last part of this program that's coming up. We're going to look into what Africans, especially what Africa can do, because we are on Africa React, or Africans React. We'll be looking at what Africans can do to really minimize the aspect of the criminalization, and at the same time to make sure that we don't have this kind of a situation in Africa. It's caught in the crossfire. Alfred Charles Kinsey was a sexologist who was equally a biologist, an American biologist, who wrote extensively on, or did research extensively on homosexuality and stuff like that. There is something people don't talk about him, because they use the LGBTQ and people who back these aspect of homosexuality use him a lot. They quote him a lot, but his friend, he had a friend they used to call Waddell, a certain guy called Waddell Pomeroy. Pomeroy explained that by the end of 1940, Kinsey had made a record, or had recorded about 450 homosexual histories. But what was disturbing was the fact that people kept insisting, or other psychologists kept insisting, especially psychologists, not the sexologists, but mostly psychologists kept insisting that homosexuality was something that is inherent and cannot be reversed. Something like that. You always hear in movies, they will say, once a gay, forever a gay. This is very, very wrong. This is incorrect. There is a possibility for it to be for it to be reversed. There are scientific data that proves that. So let's discuss within the lines of how Africa can use the gains that have been made so far by other studies, by other people, by religious bodies and other psychologists to support an environment that is an African oriented environment. We said that criminalizing it is not the right thing to do, because whether you like it or not, it is the wrong thing to do. But at the same time, it is supposed to be a topic that is taken seriously, and institutions put in place and supported to make sure that there are reorientations from the beginning of issues like that. That people can willingly report themselves that they have a situation like this in a social institution, apply for reorientation freely, and have an open discussion when it comes to this aspect. And one of the problems is we are not having open discussions about this. Very rare discussions on television will you really see delving in details and critically on this topic. And I think that it's a moment Africans look into it in a very because of the hypocrisy. But before they realize it, before many even parliamentarians realize their children are involved in those things, before they realize it, they will
exactly.
That's what I'm saying. Because we are weak and we are unable to do certain things really to stand firm with this aspect of an African agenda, and to move forward as a global or as a continental body, for us to be able to have the strength necessary, the psychological, the spiritual, the economic, and the political strength required, the political muscles required to be able to sponsor programs, to be able to do certain things, to be able to have our voice heard without begging pittances from people all around, from other countries all around, and without waiting for somebody to take decisions for us. This is our problem. This is the problem. Until we take that mature decision, that we become that proactive to take decisions that will enable us to take care of our own selves, we will not do much when it comes to this topic, because it's a very, very sensitive topic. Everybody knows that it's a very sensitive topic. It's a very difficult thing where we must be able to look at all the aspects, all the necessary aspects that will be able to help us come to a decision that will be binding even for the whole of the continent. A decision that is compatible with our values, our traditions, and our cultures as African people. You know, that's exactly what we should be looking at. But even with that, we can't be able to do enough if we can come together. We wouldn't be able to have the force to do that, because we will be at all times at odds with the Western powers, who will not only be at odds with us and stay quiet, they will be at odds and be acting towards making sure that they distort our systems for parochial interest. Before we left for the break, you talked about the human capital and the human resource, which Africa could be losing to the West or to other countries if we do not rethink or look at these aspects of the bills, especially if we are supposed to have such laws that will make Africa become a hell for people of this kind of sexual orientation or gender orientation.
No, let's face the facts. Some of these people have lots of talent, and we better cultivate them. We cultivate those talents to our good than trying to shun and then demonize them. If we really want to be honest and sincere with ourselves, we should see that a person born on African soil who has never had any contact with the West or Europe, but that person exhibits homosexual characteristics or is engaged in homosexual acts, probably that person has even never watched any European movie or Western movie. That person doesn't even know that there is a society like LGBT that exists. But intrinsically, the person is exhibiting it, and the person is African. Should you bewitch the person, or should you export that talent out? No. So if we are really meticulous about the issues of our economy, about the fact that we don't have enough money, these are some of the monies we are exporting away free of charge, and these monies will go and make monies for those people who will give us loans. You get that? And in the end, we are highly indebted. So I think it is high time we, the African populace and the elites, the educated ones, we take the bull by the horn. We come out straight. We speak the truth. We don't hide behind the curtains and try to be holier than the poor or cry than the bereaved. It has been with us time immemorial. And we have to accept it and manage it. That is all I can see for now.
What about democracies that have more of Islamic orientation? I mean, would that have it as a taboo in their laws and sometimes their social construct? Do we say that such societies, because of the aspect of homosexuality, they will not be able to have the economic foundation that they are supposed to have? Because look at it, the truth of the matter is the aspect of homosexuality or the LGBTQ, however they try to term it this time around, is slim, is quite a minority, and the impact is cannot be that heavy enough to give us a blow when it comes to economy. When it comes to economy, I believe at this point in time, I don't think we have that level. Economy, I'm talking about with the human capital that we may have here. But maybe economy of sanctions, that's a different thing altogether. And I think that is what should be more of our problem. If we have consistent economic sanction nations that are already in serious economic difficulties, we already have a lot of economic difficulties, then we'll be having again some kind of discrimination in terms of trade. I think the economic impact will be huge more or coming more from the fact that we may have sanctions, like what the Virginia Palmer is talking about. But if it is from the populace or from the population, a number of people who have these talents and who are of that sexual orientation, it could be very, very slim. However, this is how I look at it. This is my way of looking at it. I've said it from the beginning that the human beings are always human beings. The nature of human beings, the nature of human being is always striving towards excellence. In other words, we look at what helps us grow, what helps us develop, then we adopt it. There are many things we can adopt, but we can't take everything. So we look at what can help us develop, what can help us grow. We look at all of these at all angles. Look at these aspects at all angles. We don't only look at financial aspect of things, because a short-term financial profit or expedience can lead to a long-term in the future, a long-term financial deficit. So we need to be looking at things in a holistic manner. One way why we think the aspect of homosexuality and some aspect even in the African traditions and may not really be the best to handle, to have when it comes to constructing family, is because the human being is a spirit. That's very important. And this spirit needs something, nourishment, which is specifically the nourishment of love. The love is the strongest force that keeps people happy and that keeps societies moving forward, developing and being healthy. When we are starved of love based on, and one of the ways we can be starved of love is the kind of family orientation that we come, where we are from. A typical example of polygamous setup. It's not because polygamous is such a bad thing or whatever. There's no place in the scripture where polygamous families are condemned or polygamous setup is condemned. But it is as the human beings begins to develop and is heading towards its maturity, begins to realize that the best setup of things is with a setup that will enable human beings to be nourished, the human spirit to be nourished with enough love. It is to be nourished with enough love, because it is this love that will help the human being to be happier, to be healthier, and to have, if there is eternal life, to have an eternal life that can be better off. So there is.
So what if those who belong to this sexual orientation tell you that is also their way of expressing love?
Okay, so let me
because we all.
So I understand your question. So the problem with that is that this is the problem. We need families, right? They came from families. Is that not it? They came from families, and it is based on the family construct that we can move forward with any culture, tradition, or any element of feelings or whatsoever. It can only be sustained based on the family, based on the fact that we can have children to move on for, and therefore we cannot also have those children in just anyhow. That's why the setup of the family becomes very, very necessary. That's why governance begins to look at, should we just say sex should just be anyhow? Should we just leave people to have freedom to have sex the way they want? I'm telling you, if that's the way, even trees, human beings will have sex even with plantains. They'll have sex with animals. They'll have sex with. So there's got to be some level of governance interference to be able to enable us to move forward and build better societies. This is, therefore, those who have become more enlightened begin to look at, no, this is not correct. This is, if we leave things this way, this is how it's going to go. If we have to leave things this way, this is how it's going to go. And we may end up destroying our own very selves. What we want to construct, we may end up destroying what we are trying to build, which is a nation. Because a part of the fact that we want to live freely, we want to exercise the freedom we have, we want to have the sexual activities that we have, we also have a mandate, we also have a responsibility to take care of our nation. And how do you give the human capital to the nation when you are destroying that very human capital through a sexual orientation that may not permit you to continue to build that nation. So this is where some of those things become very important and very critical. We need to look at it in a very, very deep and holistic way, not only at the economic level, the psychological aspect of things. In Africa, for example, when you are of that kind of a person, there is already a psychological problem with that. Because that is not our society, is strange to us. No wonder they call it queer. It is strange to us. So therefore, the biggest option to this problem cannot also be the aspect of jurisprudence that is put in front to begin to punish people because of what they're. But of course, if we look at those rules or those bills, they don't just punish anyone. Most of the bills are, most of the aspect talks about if you are trying to recruit people, if you are trying to expose it, if you are trying to bring it to a level where people can look at it and think it's normal, like how some of the musicians are doing it in their clips and stuff like that. That's where issue of punishment comes in.
Yes. So yes, you're talking about some aspects of the bill that talks about people who try to promote such things,
yeah,
who would face similar sanctions. Mm-hmm. And I said, yes, that is true. But even normal sex, natural sex too, when you have people who try to promote such things in terms of pornography and other things, they are also sanctioned.
Right.
So yes, but do you sanction normal intimate sex between two persons? No. Again, I don't see how acts of homosexuality affects a country's development. What I see is the individual can affect the nation's development by the individual's input. Okay, so if the individual's input is positive, there's productivity. If the individual's input is negative, then there's a liability. So if we can establish that they are a liability to us as a nation, then that's a different conversation. Then we'll look at how to do it. If we can also, that will be economic wise. If we can also establish that they are a liability to us as a customary practice, then we'll have another look at it and see how we can curb it. I can attest that I know a few, because I've been writing for years, so I encounter people like that. I have an open mind to accommodate, to hear their views. That a lot of them are productive, and a lot of such productive ones are in the diaspora, and they are increasing the productivity there. That is what I can. If another person has any, fact to prove that they are a liability to us economically, that's fine. That is fair enough. The person is entitled to their opinion, and we can have a level-minded discussion on it. But as far as it stands, I don't see any of such things exhibited.
I have a different view altogether. You have a different view altogether, and we are trying to strike some kind of a balance. So far, I think we've done that. We've stricken the balance already when it comes to criminalizing these act or people who are been involved in the act decently. Decently. But when it's indecent, that's when law should come in. I think that most of the bill, parts of the, if you go deeply into that bill, that's exactly what the bill is even really talking about. Those aspects that will try to initiate people inside, those aspects that will try to make the thing to look public and stuff like that. Because under normal circumstances, when people are having sexual relationship, they do it in closed doors. It's not something that people should see. So that's why the aspect of criminalizing it really also can make some sense. Now, when I'm talking about deficits that it can bring, I'm looking at the aspect of population specifically for now, because you owe a duty to your country by leaving the next generation that should continue your legacy and also continue the traditions of our nation. Because what is a nation? It's supposed to comprise of people, supposed to comprise of a land, it's supposed to comprise of sovereignty. This is what will make it the nation. But if the people of that nation are in a way acting contrary to what people stand for and what will enable people to be sustained, And let me tell you something. Statistics prove that homosexuality is very contagious. Very, very contagious. In other words, it's so easy to move into that, especially with the males, because it's something which, let's say you put them in the boarding school or you put them in a military barracks and stuff like that. They stay there for long and they are all by themselves. And, a human being is supposed to have a sexual relationship when the body begins to demand for it. But if you are among the males, only the males, they can easily move towards that orientation. I think that we should have more discussions on this. I think Africans should react on this. These were our candid input from the African React on Roll Me TV. Please don't fail to subscribe. Don't fail to share. Don't fail to like. Leave your comments because they are very, very important for us to have an idea of what you think. It's important for us to have an idea of how African feels, what some of the Africans are saying about this. Don't fail to leave your comment. Even if you're not an African, you want to make a comment on this, make your comment respectfully. Again, my name is Tiger King. My co-host is Paul Hockney. We'll meet again soon.